Good afternoon and welcome to our Pensions Dashboard webinar. My name is Lucy Stone, Business Lead at the Pensions Regulator. Also joining us today is Paul Noone, Head of Onboarding at the Pensions Dashboard Programme, which is part of the Money and Pensions Service.
Good afternoon everyone. It's great to see so many of you in attendance.
As ever with our webinars, please don't worry about capturing all the information yourself. The webinar today is being recorded and will be available to watch again in a few days' time by navigating back to this page. We will provide you with the slides from this session along with some useful links. You'll also have the opportunity to submit your questions and comments to us as we go along. These will be answered in the Q&A session towards the end, which my colleague, Angela Bell, Industry Outreach Lead, will be hosting. Also joining Paul and I on the panel will be Joe Stacey, Pensions Dashboard's Policy Team Leader at the Department of Work and Pensions. To ask a question, just click on the box below the video player, type your question and submit. There will also be an opportunity to feedback on the session itself. The survey is now available at the top of the menu to the left-hand side of the video player. Please fill this out before you leave, even if you can't stay with us until the end. I'm now going to pass over to Paul, who will be running through what we are covering today.
Thanks, Lucy. The Pensions Dashboard Programme was set up by the Money and Pensions Service to design and implement the central infrastructure that will make pensions dashboards work. In my role, I'm working very closely with industry to help them prepare for pensions dashboards and understand how they intend to connect to the pensions dashboard ecosystem. What I'm keen to do is explain the role of the Pensions Dashboards Programme and a high-level overview of how pension dashboards will work. We will then follow it up with an update on the progress of the programme and look ahead to key developments over the coming months and the lead-up to staging commencing in April 2023. We have also recently launched our consultation on the standards will apply, and I would like to give some background on this. I'm also eager to talk about how individual schemes and organisations can connect, and in particular, the role that integrated service providers can play in helping with connection. Lucy will then talk about TPR's role in pensions dashboards, looking at the staging timeline for the different types of schemes. She'll then run through the many different ways TPR will be communicating and engaging with you, ensuring the message is getting out there that your duties are coming and what you need to do to prepare. Lucy will then talk about what we expect schemes to do and what will happen if you don't comply. Finally, she'll touch on what trustees can do now before closing with the Q&A session. It's very encouraging to have so many people on the webinar today, but I'm conscious there will be varying degrees of knowledge and understanding in relation to the Pensions Dashboards Programme. So, with apologies to those of you who have been immersed in the programme, I thought we would start with a short video detailing how pensions dashboards will work.
With more than 2/3 of people holding multiple pensions, it can be tricky to get a clear and complete picture of your pensions. We set up the Pensions Dashboards Programme, or PDP, to tackle this challenge. Dashboards will be the place where you can view information about your pensions in a clear and simple format. But it takes a lot to make that happen. You begin your journey by navigating to a dashboard. Then you submit a request to find your pensions information, which is where things get a bit more involved. First, to keep your data safe, an identity service confirms that you are who you claim to be. You will be asked to give consent for your information to be used to perform the search on your pensions and to authorise providers and schemes to send your pensions information to the dashboard for you to view. You can withdraw your consent at any time. Now the Pension Finder service takes over. Importantly, it is not a database. More like a switchboard, it never holds any personal or pensions data. The Pension Finder service sends your request to all pension providers and schemes, which return a unique identifier to the dashboard for each matching pension. Then, you can request the pensions information, which the providers and schemes will send directly to the dashboard where only you can access it. Pensions data will need to conform to a new standard. We are developing this standard with feedback from users as well as government and industry stakeholders to ensure it works for everyone involved. To keep your data safe, The Governance Register will ensure the Pensions Dashboard's ecosystem meets the required security and performance standards. And dashboards will enable you to view your pensions information online, securely, and all in one place, so you can get a clear picture of your pensions.
To recap, pensions dashboards will enable individuals to access their pensions information online, securely, and all in one place, thereby supporting better planning for retirement and growing financial well-being. Dashboards will provide clear and simple information about an individual's multiple pension savings, including their state pension. They will also help them to reconnect with any lost pension pots. As you will be aware, the UK pensions landscape is complex, involving thousands of providers and schemes and millions of entitlements. Therefore, the programme of work for both ourselves and the pensions industry to go from concept to reality is significant. The programme timeline shown here was published in spring 2021, but still holds true today. We are currently in the Phase 2 develop and test stage of the programme. A key part of this is working with our partners, Capgemini and Origo, to create the physical build of the central digital architecture. The core architecture has now been built, and we are in the process of testing and enhancing the build prior to going live in the autumn. Within this stage, we are collaborating with 7 large data providers and the state pension, who are connecting up to the environment to test its readiness and their ability to connect and communicate with the ecosystem. In addition, we are working with the MAPS Pensions Dashboard team and a number of potential dashboards providers to test their ability to connect. Collectively, this allows us to test the ability for a dashboard provider connecting at one end of the dashboard's ecosystem to communicate to a scheme at the other end, and their ability to exchange messages with each other, facilitating the flow of data through the dashboard's ecosystem. In tandem, we are working with other key stakeholders to assist in the development of the regulatory framework and develop the standards that will underpin the requirements of the Pensions Dashboard service and provide essential guidance to enable industry to prepare. I'll talk a little more on standards later. We will continue to work with our partners to test the central architecture, with industry to aid their preparation, and with users to better understand their requirements. Looking ahead, we will be inviting other organisations into the testing environment to enable them to build and test their connection to the ecosystem. This will include those organisations who are looking to build and offer integrated service provider solutions, and I'll talk a little more about these providers later on. The recent response from DWP to their consultation has helped provide further clarity for industry, and they will lay the regulations following the summer recess and as parliamentary time allows. FCA will then publish their policy statement and updated handbook rules for FCA-regulated pension providers, alongside the DWP's approved regulations. They will also be developing the regulatory framework that will apply to qualifying pensions dashboards and consult on the proposed framework later in the year. We have also just published our consultation on the standards, so let me take some time to talk you through our approach to standards. The regulations propose to delegate authority to the Money and Pensions Service to set specifications and technical requirements, which we refer to as standards. Standards will help to ensure the security, stability and effective operation of the pensions dashboard's ecosystem. They will also allow further iteration and development as the service matures and facilitate change without the need to introduce additional primary legislation. Failure to adhere to the standards will be evidence of a breach of legal requirements and may result in regulatory action by the FCA or TPR. It's important we get feedback on the draft standards, particularly from industry, on the content and application of the standards to help refine their content prior to finalisation. For that reason, we have published a consultation on the proposed standards. In addition, we have published a call for input on the design standards. The design standards will set out the requirements for the design of dashboards and the presentation of data on dashboards. The consultation on standards, together with a call for input, will run from the 19th of July to the 30th of August. So I'd encourage you all to review and feedback your comments, as your thoughts are greatly appreciated. Pension schemes and pension providers will need to consider how best to connect to the pensions dashboards ecosystem. Connecting directly to the ecosystem is a significant undertaking, particularly for smaller organisations whose infrastructure may struggle to cope with the volume of requests and may impact on the performance of systems and infrastructure if connected directly. By design, the technical standards and code of connections detailed in the consultation on standards are robust and may require significant investment in core capability and infrastructure to meet the required security and system standards. This may not be cost effective or logistically possible for many organisations to meet these standards. For these reasons, we are seeing the vast majority of organisations and schemes choosing to partner with an integrated service provider, commonly known as an ISP. The ISP provides a middle layer that sits between the dashboard ecosystem and the core pensions administration system, protecting it from the impact of the considerable volume of requests made through pensions dashboards. It also provides a scalable solution that can be applied across multiple organisations, clients and pension schemes, allowing, for example, third-party administrators to introduce one solution that will work across multiple pension administration platforms and pension scheme clients. Typically, we are seeing all the major pension software providers working on an ISP solution for their clients. Some of these providers will also extend their solution to new clients, and this allows providers, third-party administrators and individual pension schemes to consider what might be the best solution to adopt. We recommend you engage early with your existing third-party administrator, or if your scheme is administered in-house, your existing pension software provider, to understand their plans for how they may help you to connect. If you are considering creating your own connection, we recommend you contact the programme so we can walk you through the key requirements. That brings my section to a close, so I'll now pass you over to Lucy.
Thank you, Paul. So first, I'm going to talk a bit about the strategic context around pensions dashboards. Automatic enrolment was a resounding success, and more people are saving in pensions than ever before. Combined with savers changing work patterns, few people now have one job for life, most people end up with more than one pension. And this can be difficult to track. And we know that savers don't always tell administrators when their details change. For example, they change their name or move home. And on the other hand, savers have more complex decisions to make at retirement now than ever before. Dashboards can help people reconnect with lost pensions and show information in one place, and from there they can seek advice and guidance and plan for retirement. At TPR, we are really supportive of dashboards for all these reasons. We've recognised dashboards as a key initiative in both our corporate strategy and our corporate plan. Pensions dashboards might be a simple concept in theory, but they are incredibly complex to deliver in practice. There's a lot of technical detail underpinning the system, which Paul introduced earlier on, but our regulatory landscape is also very diverse. There are over 3,000 occupational schemes, pension schemes, in scope for the new duties, and our role will be to make sure they comply with these duties. These schemes vary hugely in terms of benefit type, complexity, size, data quality, etc. And to put it bluntly, the pensions industry has not been paying data or technology the attention it deserves, so there is some catching up to do. There's also a lot of other change going on, and existing pressures being put on trustees and those they work with, in particular administrators. So we at the regulator are taking a hands-on approach, similar to the approach we took for the hugely successful automatic enrolment programme. And we will be communicating very actively to help trustees and scheme managers prepare for their duties. while simultaneously building the systems and processes we need to monitor and enforce compliance. As with automatic enrolment, participation will be staged. This means that not all 3,000 schemes are expected to connect by the same deadline. Instead, this will be spread over more than 2 years, getting all large schemes on board in the first 18 months and the medium schemes over another year. TPR and indeed the Pensions Dashboard programme at MAPS worked closely with the DWP as they developed the staging model. And it is designed to balance savers' interests, achieving comprehensive coverage of pensions as quickly as possible, with industry's reality that some schemes need longer to prepare. The first schemes to stage will be the large master trusts. They will be able to connect from the 1st of April 2023 and will have to do so by August 2023. This is followed by DC schemes used for automatic enrolment, with DB, hybrid schemes and DC schemes which aren't being used for automatic enrolment starting later. In recognition of the additional complexity being created by the implementation of the McLeod remedy, public service schemes will go at the tail end of large schemes in September 2024. Then, from October 24 to October 25, it will be medium schemes' turn to connect. Schemes with fewer than 99 members are out of scope for pensions dashboards for the time being. One important technical point to note, your scheme size is based on the number of active and deferred members you have, not total members. So if you have 1,000 members, but 200 of these are pensioners, your size is 800. Let's talk a bit more about communications. As I mentioned, we are going to be very proactive in this space. We have put out guidance and have already updated this in light of the government's consultation response. But we know that putting out guidance is not enough. We need to get the message out there that the duties are coming and what you need to do to prepare in as many ways as we can. This webinar is an example, but you can also expect to hear from us at industry events and in the press. We are also working closely with industry bodies and leading administrators so they can also spread the word. And importantly, we will be writing to every single scheme at least 12 months ahead of their deadline. And I'll cover that in more detail in a moment. We also know that trustees and scheme managers will rely on others to help them prepare, including the administrators and administration software providers Paul mentioned earlier. And we are engaging directly with the largest of these enablers so we can understand how they are gearing up to support trustees and the issues they face. And this leads me to a key point I want to get across. We are all learning. As schemes prepare and onboard, there will be challenges to overcome and issues to be resolved. We need to maintain an open dialogue. We can only help you if we know what's happening, and we can work together to solve problems. And as we learn, we will update and adapt our guidance and other communications, both to reflect what we've learned, but also because we know that what works for a large master trust may not work for a 200-member DB scheme. I mentioned that we will be writing to all schemes ahead of their duties. This starts at least 12 months ahead of their connection deadline. The first communication will go to the chair of trustees, and they are asked if they want to nominate a day-to-day contact to also receive our messages, someone who is helping them do the work. The first communication signposts our guidance and sets out our assessment of their deadline, though each scheme needs to check this against the regulations. And we will write again several times as schemes get closer to their deadline to ensure they remain on track. The dates given on this slide give you a rough indication of when we will communicate, but it may flex a little. So this is all very well, but what you are really here to understand is what you will have to do. The first thing, which we cannot emphasize enough, is that you need to get on top of your data. You need to make sure your personal data is accurate so you can find your members, and that the information you provide them on the value of their pension is right. And you will need to do so in many cases pretty much instantaneously, so this data all has to be digitally accessible. This doesn't just mean it's digital information contained in a scan file which your system can't read. That wouldn't work. It has to be searchable and retrievable. You should be speaking to your administrator about this as soon as possible. The other thing you should be thinking about now is how you're going to connect. You have two options, as Paul mentioned. You can build your own software interface linking your administration system to the dashboard ecosystem. Or you can use someone else's, for example, that of your third-party administrator, or the new providers Paul mentioned called integrated service providers. But as Paul made clear, if you decide to connect directly, it's a big undertaking, and I would reiterate his point that you should be speaking to the Pensions Dashboard Programme team as soon as you can. If you're going through a third party, you won't have to deal with the technical requirements in the same way, but you might need to procure a supplier or amend existing contracts. And you have to ensure you have robust controls in place for appointing and managing these suppliers, as ultimately trustees are still accountable. This also takes time, so you should factor this into your plans. And you need to do all this work in plenty of time to connect by your deadline. If you don't, we will have the power to issue notices and even penalties. But the work doesn't end with connection. Once you are connected, you need to be able to match savers to their pensions. So to take the personal information you get from the system and use it to search your records. If you're completely confident you found them, then you register the match and they can retrieve all their information. But if you aren't fully confident, for example, if some data matches but not everything you'd like to see, then you can register a possible match. With a possible match, you don't send any personal information back to the user. Rather, they are urged to get in touch with you to confirm their details. So it's a really handy tool to avoid either not finding someone when you should or, critically, sending the wrong person information. So when a match is made, the user can then ask to see their pension information. This includes information about the pension they've built up to date, but also a projection until retirement. There are rules for how you need to calculate these. For DC benefits, you'll need to follow the rules set out by the Financial Reporting Council. For DB benefits, you'll need to follow scheme rules, though you may also use a simpler calculation for limited time. You need to make sure you understand what rules you need to follow and that your data is prepared in line with the right rules. Critically, you won't have long to return this information. If you've provided it in the last year or so, then you have to return the information immediately. If you need to make the calculation, then you have 3 days for DC benefit and 10 days for DB or hybrid benefit. So many of you will find it useful to get ahead of this, for example, by bulk revaluing your benefits ahead of connection. Something else you should be talking to your administrator about. I know you're keen to get to the Q&A by now, but there are a couple of more slides to get through. Briefly on compliance and enforcement. We are working behind the scenes to put in place the processes and systems we need to monitor and, if necessary, enforce compliance. Monitoring will be data-led. We will be getting information from the dashboard ecosystem, so we are working with the Pension Dashboard Programme on building that. The draft regulations propose new powers for us to issue compliance notices, third-party compliance notices and penalty notices for dashboard duties. But we also have access to our existing powers, in particular around information gathering. As I mentioned earlier, we recognise this is a big challenge for industry and we will be pragmatic. But equally, there is no excuse for trustees not to try and get to grips with this. And we will take a robust approach to willful non-compliance. We will be transparent about this, and we are developing our compliance and enforcement policy as we speak, and will consult on this later in the year. So what should you be taken away from today's webinar? First, a shameless plug, read our guidance. Obviously, critically, you need to find out your deadline, so you know how long you have to prepare. Think now about how you will connect. Will you build or buy an interface? And while others are doing the heavy lifting, trustees and managers are ultimately accountable. So this should be a regular item on your board agenda. And this cannot be said enough, get on top of your data. Data is at the core of dashboards, both to the saver's experience, but also your ability to comply. Before we move into our final Q&A session, we are going to take a short break to give you a couple of minutes to submit your questions or grab a quick refreshment. Don't forget to submit a question. Just click on the box under the video player, type your question and press submit. Paul, Angela, Joe and I will be back in 2 minutes.
Well, welcome back, everyone. I'm Angela Bell, Industry Outreach Lead at TPR, and I'm delighted to be hosting the Q&A session today. I'd also like to extend a really warm welcome to Joe Stacey, Pensions Dashboard Policy Team Leader at DWP, who's going to be joining Lucy and Paul on the panel today. Well, it looks like we have plenty of questions already queued up, so let's get started. The very first question I'm going to direct to Joe, and it's how will consumers' interests be safeguarded by the dashboards?
Thanks, Angela. Well, I think the first point I'd want to make about that is that the system has been designed to maximise data security, and it does this, for example, by not allowing data to be stored anywhere on the digital architecture. And also the individual, I think, as Paul alluded to earlier in his presentation, the individual is always in control over who has access to their data and can revoke that access at any time. The other aspect is that any firm wishing to provide a dashboard service must become a qualifying pensions dashboard service, which will be a regulated activity by the Financial Conduct Authority. And as part of that process of becoming authorised to deliver dashboard services, those firms providing a dashboard must demonstrate that they have met the standards which have been set by the Money and Pensions Service and is covered in our regulations. And if they can't do that, then they simply will not be able to connect.
Thank you, Joe. Next question I'm going to direct to Lucy, and it's from a scheme. We have a pension scheme with 2 members, both of whom are trustees. What duty do I have as a trustee, and how can I discharge them?
Right, so first of all, it's important to note that if you have 99 or fewer members, you are actually not in scope of this set of regulations. So if you only have 2 members, you wouldn't fall into scope. You can choose to connect on a voluntary basis, and you can find out more on MAPS's website, where they set out what a voluntary connection looks like. I'd just like to add a little bit of nuance. A lot of schemes operate multiple sections. If you have 2 members in one section, but you have, let's say, 110 in the other section, you need to look at the totality. In that case, you would have 112, and therefore you would have duties under regulation. But if you're a simple scheme with 2 trustees, you're not actually in scope.
Thank you. And this next question, I think, is probably directed at you, Lucy, and also Joe. And it's, what is DAP, or DAP? And why does it matter to the trustee? And when will it be?
Right, so you might have heard the term DAP. It means Dashboard Available Point, and it's a slightly wordy way to say when dashboards will be launched to the wider public. So like a lot of digital projects, there'll be a testing phase with more and more users being on board, but DAP is the point at which anyone can go and use a dashboard. So it matters for you, the trustee, because that's the point at which you'll start getting possibly higher volumes of inquiry, because absolutely anyone can connect. So you need to be ready to answer follow-up questions if your members have any. You will need to provide data to the testers that come beforehand, so you do need to be prepared to do that beforehand. But that is the point where it kind of flips into the mass market. As for when it will be, I will leave that to Joe.
Sure, and it's the big question, isn't it? I think, as Lucy has alluded to, it's subject to many factors as to when dashboards will be launched to the public. One of those key elements will be the coverage, the proportion of memberships that are going to be findable via dashboards, as well as the user testing, which is going to ramp up as more and more schemes connect to dashboard services. And that will be used to inform the department and delivery partners as to when we feel that the service should be ready to be launched and made available for widespread use. We did consult on certain aspects of the dashboard's available point recently. Included as part of that was that we proposed that the Secretary of State should provide a formal notice of the dashboard's available point at least 90 days ahead of the DAP. That was subject to consultation. We've had lots of helpful responses to inform that, and we're taking that away. And I should say that we'll be developing the criteria for the dashboard's available point in collaboration with our delivery partners and also with the industry. And it will be such that the idea is that we will make it clear to users, to industry, when we think the dashboard's available point is likely, well in advance of that formal notice period, so it doesn't come as a surprise. But we will be responding to that consultation, publishing our response to that consultation, probably when we lay the regulations later this year.
Thank you, Joe. And on the theme of consultations, the next one looks at PDP's consultation on standards. So I'm going to direct this to Paul. How long is the consultation on standards running for, and will PDP be publishing a response?
Well, the consultation runs until the 30th of August. We are hoping for, I think we made the point earlier, that industry has a lot of value to add in terms of answering that response. So we're looking for hopefully a good response to the consultation. On a slightly different matter, I would make the point as well, you're not obliged to answer every question within the consultation. So if there is a particular question that concerns you or piques your interest, then feel free to answer as many or as little of the questions as you would like. Once we've had a chance to digest all those responses, then we'll be publishing a response to the consultation.
Thank you, Paul. And the next question is to Joe, and it's about the government regulations. When will they be finalised?
So as Paul mentioned in his presentation earlier, the regulations will be laid later this year as parliamentary time allows. We have now published our response to the consultation on the draft pensions dashboards regulations. So it's our aim to lay the regulations around mid-autumn, but beyond that it's difficult to say when they'll be finalised because, as we've said, it's subject to parliamentary timetabling.
Thank you. And this next question is scheme related, so I'm going to direct it to Lucy. What happens when a member transfers to another scheme? Is there a risk that they might see that record twice?
Right, that's an excellent question. So if you are a scheme and you have a member who you've matched previously, you would have registered the match. You would have said, yes, I've got a record for you. When they leave the scheme, you would deregister the match. So effectively, that member would no longer find their record because they've left your scheme. And then the new scheme takes over. And the new scheme must be able to show some basic information, such as that there is a pension and the contact details for the administrator within 3 months. It has longer to show value data. So what would happen is for that period of 3 months, the saver would actually not see the record at all. And after 3 months, it would have some information. But the saver knows they're being transferred. So that's, that gap is tolerable. But the main thing is they won't see their record twice.
Thank you. The next question that's come in is about the Money and Pension Service dashboard itself. So will that dashboard launch first? And I'm going to direct that at Joe.
So we did set out in the legislation that the Money and Pension Service is required to provide a dashboard, and we are committed to ensuring that the MAPS dashboard, the Money and Pension Service dashboard, is available from the start. So from when dashboards are launched to the public. However, it's also our intention, our aim to enable it such that other qualifying dashboard service providers may also be in a position to offer their services at the point of the dashboard available point.
Thank you. And there's another scheme-related one, which I think may be directed at both you, Lucy, and Paul. So we operate a DB and a DC section, and we use different administrators. How does connection work in practice for us?
Right. So first of all, as a scheme, if you have 2 sections or more than 2 sections, you are responsible for making sure all of them are connected and you can search the records in both sections at the same time. So your connection deadline applies to all your sections. So you should be speaking to your DB and DC administrator to understand the quality of the data and how they're preparing, and you'll want to talk to both of them about how they're planning to connect to the ecosystem. You may end up using 2 connections, one for each administrator. Equally, you may choose to pull the information and have 1 connection. But the key thing is to speak to both your administrators and make sure that they both have all the information they need to help you comply.
Yeah, and just to add, Lucy, I think that scenario is covered in the standards. But as Lucy said, I think the key point here is having early discussions with both your administrators to make sure they're coordinated and that they can both meet the one staging deadline for the scheme as a whole.
Thank you. Moving on to the next question, which is one for Joe. Will dashboards include state pension information?
Yep, in a word, yes, they will, and we are committed to ensuring that the state pension data will also be available from the outset. And in fact, the department is working with the Pensions Dashboards programme at the moment to connect as part of the develop and test phase that is going on right now.
Thank you. Oh, and here's an interesting one, I think also to you, Joe. We want to see national insurance numbers. We want to use national insurance numbers to match users to their pensions, but we've got some members with temporary numbers who've left. Is there anywhere that we can go to find out their national insurance numbers?
So we did set out, in fact, in response to our original consultation back in 2019, that the department would not be providing a NINO validation service for security reasons. We have deliberately not stipulated what attributes schemes should be using when it comes to matching, to provide some flexibility, to allow for variations in the quality of the data. Of course, if the scheme is not sure that there is a match, but there might be a match, they can and should return a possible match via the dashboard to the individual.
Thank you. Moving on to the next question. It's another scheme-related one, so I'm going to direct this at Lucy again. I've recently become a trustee. Is all of this new information fairly straightforward to understand and implement?
Well, as a trustee, as you know, you have duties to have the right knowledge and understanding to run your schemes. We provide guidance. The guidance is in as plain English as we can make pensions be. So I would suggest that would be your starting point, and you need to understand the basics of your roles and duties. There will be other people who are helping you with this. You will have advisors who will be supporting you, but I think a starting point would be our guidance, and from there you might have questions for your advisors, for example.
Thank you. This one's short and sweet, and I think for Joe, why is this dashboard necessary?
Well, I think Lucy outlined this in her presentation. As we've shifted away increasingly towards DC pension benefits, there's increasing responsibility on the individual to plan effectively for their retirement and be in a position to take potentially quite complex decisions as they approach retirement. And the Pensions Dashboard is there to support individuals in starting to engage with their pensions and to support better planning and help to signpost users to advice and guidance as part of that to help inform their decision making.
Thank you. Next question down here, back to you, Lucy. It's about DB schemes and data. Lots of DB schemes do not provide a yearly statement to deferred DB members. Will these schemes also be included on the dashboard?
Yes, those schemes are included in dashboards. It is one of the bigger changes that you will need to be able to provide not only the estimate of value accrued to date to your deferred members, but you'll need to project it and you'll need to be able to do it in today's money, so revalue it. So, you know, that is something that you might want to get to grips with, understand and speak to your administrator about.
Thank you. Joe, I think we're back to you with this one, with a question about the PPF. Will pension benefits held in the Pension Protection Fund show on the dashboard?
No, not yet. So that's not included as part of the initial dashboards. We are exploring the options with the Pension Protection Fund and considering how we might get PPF benefits and potentially FAS benefits available via dashboard in the future, but it's subject potentially to further legislation.
And Lucy, we're back to you with another data question here. What data will a person need to provide in order for the pension scheme to see if they have a match? What will happen where people have changed their name?
I think that's actually a question for myself and Paul. So PDP sets out the data that savers will need to provide, some of which will be verified by the Identity Service, some of which they'll provide voluntarily. And there's a range of information. Paul, can you say?
Yeah, certainly within the ID verification process, they will be asking for details of previous surnames. Mm-hmm. So in the event of someone getting married, for example. So that eventuality should be covered within the ID verification process.
If you want to find out about the data items in particular, you can find it in PDP's data usage guide or also in our guidance. So we'll give you the full list of information you'll be either automatically provided or that the saver will be asked to provide.
Thank you. And stay at the front, Lucy. This one's for you as well. My understanding is that the pensions dashboard will only be of benefit to employees currently in work or who have deferred pensions. So not to those who are already retired and drawing their pensions. Is that correct?
So it's correct to that pensions in payment are out of scope. However, it's worth noting that the nature of the workforce and people's working patterns is changing, and a lot of people may be drawing pension from one scheme but still working and actively contributing to another. So it will be of benefit to those people as well.
And the next question is, how would I find out the exact staging date for my pension scheme? I think that's another one for Lucy, but it could be Joe.
So again, our guidance sets out the current understanding of the staging date, so you can look it up there. You'll need to know the kind of pension scheme you are, so if you're DB, DC, a master trust, public service, the number of active deferred members you had at a specific date. But we would urge everyone to actually confirm this when the regulations are published, which Joe explained would be sometimes in mid-autumn.
Okay. Next question I'm going to ask is again a scheme-related one, and it's to do with matching. Are schemes obliged to recognise a partial match, or can they just conclude it's a perfect match or no match at all?
So I would flip that round because not finding someone when you should would be a breach, and obviously sending someone information when they're not a member of your scheme would also be a breach. So I think partial matches is actually really powerful and very useful to industry. If you're not quite 100% confident, you're not satisfied enough of the information you've had to say, yeah, here's a match, here's your information. But equally, you don't want to say, no, I don't have you, because that might be wrong. So that's where possible matches come in. So I think it's worth reframing the thinking and realising it's actually quite a powerful tool to avoid those two breach scenarios.
Thank you. And I'm going to give you a little rest here, and I'm going to move on to Joe. This question's for you. We're going to be changing our third-party administrator in early to mid-2023. Can we delay our connection to allow the new administrator to get fully up to speed on our scheme and data?
So there are provisions in the draft regulations for allowing schemes to apply to the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions to defer their connection in certain circumstances, including when a scheme is has entered a contract or is committed to changing its administrator or transferring its data to a new platform. There are some specific criteria in the regulations, so I'd encourage you to check the government response for the detail. I think the key things to point out are that the applications must be made within 12 months of the regulations coming into force. And we have also said in our response to the consultation that applications must be received at least 2 months before your staging deadline. We will be publishing some further guidance on the deferral application process, and those decisions that will be made ultimately by the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions will be taken in consultation with the Pensions Regulator.
Thank you, Joe. And Lucy, we're back to you with this one. This is an interesting one. So for occupational schemes, is it the responsibility of the trustees or the scheme administrators to ensure compliance with DWP's legislation on dashboard?
Well, that's nice and easy. It's the responsibility of the trustees, like most pensions legislation. The duties fall on the trustees. They can delegate the work, they can assign someone else to help them, like the administrator, but ultimately they remain accountable. So that's why it's so important to have the right internal controls, as they're called, around all your advisors. I have to say, though, that one of the powers that it's proposed the DWP will give to us, we won't just have the power to issue compliance notices and penalty notices to trustees, but where it's a third party who's caused the trustee to fail in their duty, then we do have the option of issuing third party compliance notices or penalty notices. So ultimately, it is the trustee's responsibility, but if they've tried everything, they've done everything right, and it is a third party causing them, we do have options there.
Thank you. Paul, I'm going to bring you back in here. Can you talk a little bit about the steps you're taking to get design input and feedback on the user experience from future users of the dashboard?
Sure, Ange. I mean, as part of the programme, we've done extensive user research, and we'll be continuing in that user research over the coming months of the programme. In particular, we anticipate that once we enter staging and the early part of the staging process will see some very large pension schemes and some very large pension organisations stage. We have the opportunity between that sort of June, from sort of April to August next year and beyond, and the timing of the dashboard's availability point to undertake much higher volume user testing. So we'll be engaging with industry to build up the number of consumers who are actually using the dashboard in a controlled environment prior to the dashboard's availability point. And that will give us a lot of information around the user experience, but also around things like the experience of matching, what volume of queries are typically being generated by users using the dashboard and that sort of thing. So we've done quite a lot of user research thus far, but we would expect to be building that up progressively through the first part of staging and over the period to the dashboard availability point.
Thank you. And staying with you on this one, Paul, when are the new data standards expected to be available?
Well, the draft data standards have been released as part of the package of communications on standards. We have a dependency on the legislation to be passed to formally give us the powers to set standards. So obviously we're in the consultation process now. We will be refining those standards based on their feedback, but we would anticipate that once the legislation is passed and formally gives us the powers to set standards, we'll then be communicating final standards. So close to when the legislation is finally passed, so late autumn, I suspect, this year.
Thank you. And Lucy, back to you with the data matching question. What guidance will TPR provide to schemes on how to choose appropriate matching criteria?
So at the moment, our guidance makes it clear that you should be setting your matching criteria. The legislation puts the onus on trustee to make sure they have the right matching criteria, and this needs to be based on the quality of your data. So in the example we got previously, if you have concerns about the quality of national insurance numbers, for example, you shouldn't be using that for matching. You can use possible matches, but also you can set your matching criteria slightly wider while you do the work in the background to improve your core data. So expect your matching criteria to be iterative. We will be updating our guidance. If we find there's a need for more guidance on matching, we will update that. It's worth knowing that the Pensions Administration Standards Association, PASA, has worked with other industry bodies to set out what they think are sensible conventions for matching data. So that might be a starting point from which to work as a trustee.
Thank you. And staying with you, Lucy, for this one, will dashboards apply to overseas sections of a scheme? So the legislation it's a scheme that has, the technical term is its main administration in Great Britain. But that's not necessarily where the records, where the administrator is, but where the scheme is located. And at the moment, you have to be in Great Britain. Typically, the scheme would be there, even if a section serves overseas users. The scheme will either be in Great Britain or it's not. Thank you. And this is now the penultimate question coming up, and it's one for you, Paul. How frequently can an individual make an information request, and for how long a period does a retrieval of information remain valid? Can it be represented, for example, in a week or a month's time?
Yes, so this is quite a complex area, so I'd refer you to the standards here. But yes, once an individual makes an information request, they will create a unique identifier, and that will be retained for a period of time, and can be so they don't necessarily need to make multiple requests through the dashboard. But I'd refer you to the standards, and that's outlined very comprehensively within there.
Thank you. And for the last question, I think we're back to Lucy here, and it's about buyouts. Are buyout policies not included in pensions dashboards? With more and more schemes achieving buyout, we can expect a large proportion of benefits to be insured and consequently excluded from the dashboard. Is that correct?
So I'm going to ask Joe to come in if I get any of this wrong, but buyout policies are going to be included in the pensions dashboard. They are a type of policy that's covered by, it's regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority rather than TPR. So though they are not covered by the dashboard regulations, which DWP is setting, they are covered by the FCA rules, which the FCA is setting. So it would be like a transfer. Effectively, you would stop showing on your old scheme. Within 3 months, you would be showing the information through the buyout provider.
Thank you. And thank you to all of our panellists for your participation in today's webinar. And thank you, audience, for being so engaging and asking such brilliant questions, really thought-provoking. And we're going to be going through those questions after this webinar and looking for themes there. And where our guidance doesn't already cover them, we will be updating our guidance in due course. I'm now going to hand you over to Lucy for some closing words.
Thanks, Angela. I'd like to close today's discussion by touching on some of the key things we've heard over the past hour. Pensions Dashboard have been talked about for a long time, but they are now with us. The Pensions Dashboard programme is well underway with the technological build, and they're consulting on their standards. And as Paul has repeatedly said, they are keen to hear from you on these. Another point to make is trustees will have a lot to do to get their data and systems ready, and our guidance explains your duties as trustees and the steps you should be taking. That's another point that has come through. Let's remember that it is trustees' responsibility to do this, but you need to be working closely with your administrators, your administration software providers, and other parties to make sure you get ready, so talk to them soon. We hope you found the webinar useful. As mentioned earlier, you'll be able to download the slides from the Resource tab in the Delegate area. You will also be able to download a useful links document to all the important information we mentioned today. And of course, the webinar recording will be available to watch again in a few days' time by navigating back to this page. As always, we'd love to hear your views on the webinar, so please fill out our survey by navigating to the top of the menu on the left-hand side of the video player. Thank you once again to Paul and Joe for joining me, and to Angela for chairing the Q&A. Thank you all for joining. Goodbye.